Hello everyone and welcome to part 2 of my how to paint a Sylvaneth Treelord Ancient. I hope you enjoy it. So for this step here I'm using white to highlight the more prominent areas of the sort of beard hair strands of this model. The airbrush did put a nice glow down, but I just want to redefine just a couple of the little sort of areas towards the tips, just so they pop a little bit more. For a lot of this you can actually use the side of the brush, which you can see me doing just here. They're quite nice sharp edges, so just a quick swipe along with the brush catches most of the detail on those. The paint's quite thin here and I'm sort of dragging it out and up the strands to sort of keep a nice transition in places. Again, with the side of the brush, just catch the outside edges here. As the face is quite a focal point of the model, it's worth putting in the effort here just to get the extra highlights in place. With a nice fine point on the brush, you want to just start putting in these lines on the beard. Some of the texture is available to paint over, but most of it you will have to freehand. As you can see here, sort of trying to get a good angle to show you where I'm putting the lines. I will flip it around in a sec so you can see it a bit easier. You want to try and aim to get about 3 strands painted in, so 3 little lines per sort of segment of the beard. So you can see with not too much work and just some straight lines painted, we can add quite a bit of texture here to the model. And the same as we just did on the beard, apply line highlights with the sort of edge of the brush here to the rest of the bark spirity areas, so on the arms and around the legs and around the crotch joint as well. Here you can see I've made a bit of a mistake and put a bit too much white on, so just with a clean brush I'm going to feather the white out. It's the advantage using quite thin paints, you can always quickly fix it before it dries. To get the glow effect on the eye, just paint the actual center eyeball sort of area with the pure white, and a tiny little highlight along the bottom of the eye socket. You'll see this here, just a little line, sort of gives it a bit of a sharper edge. The white I'm using is quite thin, so I have painted the eyes twice. You may need to as well, just to make sure they're nice and vibrant. And now time for a different colour. So now we're moving on to P3's Sanguine Highlight, which is a really nice sort of deep red. It's called a highlight, but I like using it for a base tone. There isn't really a equivalent colour in the GW range, so I have put a suggestion in the start of the video for what you could actually use instead of this colour. This stage of the model is quite time consuming, as both arms have leaves to paint, as does the torso, and you'll see that the legs have loads of leaves to paint. And make sure you get the front and back of these. If you use the paint thin down, you can actually keep a bit of shade coming through from the previous sort of browns we've sprayed down. Don't forget to paint all the small leaves on the beard here, some of them are quite tiny. The little toggle you see towards the bottom of the beard, I painted that in the exact same way as the bark on the rest of the model, so using the khaki followed by the brown wash. The small piece of twine was also painted with Sanguine Highlight. I've also painted all the little mushrooms on the model, like the bits of fungus on the bark here, and also on the torso in the same colour. You can already see the models starting to come together quite nicely with a contrast of colours here. And we're back to painting more leaves again. So remember just to get all the ones up both sides of the legs, front and back. This bit's a bit time consuming. The sanguine highlight I'm using here is just thinned down with a bit of water. I haven't used any mediums or anything fancy here, just plain clean water. There's a lot of leaves to paint, so I'm just going to double time speed this just so we can get through it a bit quicker. If only this was a real function we could do in real life. I move backwards and forwards between my different ranges of brushes that I'm using. In this video I'm actually using one of the Element Games character brushes. The ones I've been using previously have been some Windsors, but this video is GW wash brushes and a Element Games character brush. I used mostly a GW small layer brush for my my Skyfires that I've recently finished. I managed to get quite a nice one, and it held a good point for most of the project. I've sort of gone away from them again though, because they do tend to perish quite quickly. I'm using Secret Weapon Wash's Fallout colour here. I'm putting this over some of the sort of fungusy looking areas on the bark, not the mushrooms, but there's some like little sort of growths and bits and pieces on some of the areas. This just gives it a sort of another colour onto the model. You don't want to use it too thick. I have thinned it slightly. It still looks like a wash. It's more of a glaze though, but it will stain the colour quite easily, so don't go too heavy with this. I mean, you can leave some in the recesses and use it a bit more like a wash. You can see here I'm just sort of picking it back out and dragging it around just to make sure it doesn't settle too much. This colour is very, very vibrant. Just, you know, the name of it sort of gives that away. If you can't get hold of this, moot green thinned to a glaze would work, because again that's quite a bright green. This is perfect for this, however, because it is very toxic looking. It does come across quite subtle in the recording. It is strong though. It is a very strong pigment, so less is more with this one. If it's not strong enough, go on and add another layer once it's dry. It is, like I said, strong. This wash does dry quite glossy, so once it's all finished, you might want to matte varnish it to bring it back down. I'm going to matte varnish the entire model because it is being sent out through the post and it will be used on the gaming table, so I don't want it, any sort of damage to the model. I've gone and sped this next section up by double again. So I've made a 50-50 mix of sanguine highlight and white. Now I'm going to go along the model and edge highlight every single leaf, both sides, front and back, and then do around the little mushrooms as well. And remember to highlight the little bit of twine above the toggle on the beard as well. You can use the edge of the brush mostly for this because it has quite nice raised surfaces. And remember to highlight all the small little leaves in the beard. Some of these are quite small, so it's a bit of a pain to get to some of them. I also use the khaki colour to highlight the twine sort of vine that connects all the leaves together, just one single little strand, just so they're all linked up. The little mushrooms here are quite nice to highlight. They've got a nice sharp edge around them, so you can just get the edge of the brush in there and one little swipe all the way around. and time for more leaves. I mean, you could, if you wanted to, dry brush these, but just doing the extra little bit of work with the line highlights all the way around them, it will make the model look better overall. But you know, if you want to speed it up, then I guess go ahead and do a dry brush. Getting the middle of some of the leaves as well, some of them have got a little ridge along the back of them. If you can get a nice little line, it just sort of adds another bit of depth to them. I painted some small white dots onto the mushrooms just to give them another little colour and make them pop out a little bit more. So the legs, torso, right arm, beard and head have all been assembled now. The model's actually coming together quite nicely here. I've painted the claws here with just black. You want to make sure you get in and right up to the edges and get all the nice sharp lines done. They are separate from the knuckle, so you can get a nice line. You don't have to freehand this in or anything. I apply a light dry brush here across the sort of braided material. You don't have to be too exact with this. Just hitting the edges of some of the leaves is okay, because it will give them a bit of an edge highlight. Just maybe one light or two light dry brushes if you want to add a bit more definition here. And don't forget to do the sides here as well. I base coat the flower, lotus leaf, mushroom, fungus type thing. I'm not even sure what it's meant to be, at the top of the model here. All purple all over. Next I apply a coat of Warlord purple through the airbrush, just get a gradient built up from the dark purple at the bottom, trying to get a nice flat colour all the way up to the tips here. Next I apply a highlight of squid pink towards the top, building up the gradient further to a brighter pink. This purple to pink combo is actually what I use on all of my basing for my Chaos Army, so it may look a bit familiar here. These are my three staple colours: Hex, Lichen, Warlord purple, squid pink, finally up to white. Squid pink is quite a strong pigment and will cover very well, so you want to do this in thin layers and build it up. If you do it too much, it will overpower quite quickly. I finish off the end of the little tendril bits here with just pure white. Again, quite thin. I don't want to have too much of a harsh transition. One step that you won't see in the video here that I've actually done is, once all the pink and white's done, is I've mixed up a really thin glaze of purple, the Warlord purple again, just to soften up around the lotusy flower bit. It's very thin. It's not a wash, just to sort of tie in all the colours nicely and remove that sort of airbrush look you sort of get left over with. It's quite an important step when using the airbrush to get a lot of gradient blends. You'll get that sort of powdered airbrush look that a lot of people don't really like. Some people love it, some people absolutely hate it, and just applying a very thin glaze over the top of sort of your mid-tone colour sort of harmonises all the colours together and takes away that sort of frowned upon powdered airbrush finish. I apply the first gradient here in the transition on the claw. I've masked off the claws behind it with a bit of tissue paper. This is not ideal because it's not a solid surface, so you may get stuff go through it. This was just a bit lazy of me here. I should have been using like a latex glove or something, or a piece of plastic, or just something without the sort of porous texture that the tissue paper has. I applied the second highlight here with the white over the grey without anything sort of separating the claws, so I didn't get any overspray here. It was just easier with holding the model in one hand and the airbrush in the other. Ideally though, you want to sort of stop any spray from going from one claw to another just by partitioning it with something and just blocking the gap. This white layer here is very thin. You want to build this up slowly. Too harshly and you'll end up with like a straight line between white to grey. You want a nice soft smooth transition from the whole claw length, so nice and thin steady layers, and build it as you go. Now with just the white on its own on the brush, I'm applying some edge highlights all around the claws. They're quite three-dimensional with their edges, so you can edge of the brush that first one you couldn't really see that I did. I had it in a bit of a poor angle. Just go all the way along the length of it, nice and thin. This edge highlight will contrast really nicely against the mid sort of tone grey towards the dark grey black towards the edges, and it'll blend in nicely with the white right at the tips. quite a simple effect, but looks very nice on things like this. Across an entire army it looks great, and it's not too involved. It doesn't actually take that long once you've done it a couple of times. I lost the recording for this bit, but it's basically just the gems painted red and then blended up to a yellow while the red's still wet. Just applying a bit of yellow to get that orange transition. And then a little white dot just in the top right corner to finish off the gem. I'm applying charred brown here to the vine that wraps round the top of the lotus mushroom flower thing that we painted purple earlier. Make sure you get the branch, little twig bit that sticks out as well, and all around the leaves. Time to base coat a few more leaves. This time luckily it's only a little handful of them. So once these are done, you could just go ahead and paint them with the technique we did earlier. So 50-50 sanguine and the white, the same as all the little small leaves. I decided to add a bit more colour to the model though, and have some sort of autumnal leaves, a bit of orange added in. I was going to edge highlight these with Heartfire from P3. It's a very warm yellow. It's not quite an orange, but it's somewhere between a yellow and orange. It's a really nice colour. I do start out edge highlighting them, but as I'm going through I decide that I'm going to layer these leaves up with the yellow, as you'll see shortly. I then apply a Fugan orange shade over the top of these. Thinned down slightly, it is a very strong orange, just to give them that more vibrant look. I dry brush the entire base with gold fag brown. Then I applied a dry brush of Terminata stone over the entire base. Not so much on the cork areas, more the sand. I then paint the rim of the base with black. Base coated the staff with the graphite from scale 75, which we used on the claws earlier on. Get up right up under the vine bit as well, above the hand. I then washed all the sort of open bark sort of cracks in the wood with the Agrax Earth Shade thinned. I then used charred brown to paint on some lines to give the texture to the wood. There are some already notched into the wood, so you can paint into those. I did add quite a few more in though, just to break up the surface and add a bit more detail to the model. I then applied the fallout wash again to the sort of little knobbly moss growth knots in the wood, like the body earlier on. On a lighter colour you can really see how bright this colour is now over this light grey. Using white, I paint on some little spots onto the top of the sort of leaf bit here. I'm still not quite sure what this is. I'm guessing it's a blooming flower of some sort. But yeah, just nice little circles, quite thin. Might want to do these in a few coats just so you get no splodges of white paint on there. Just nice little flat round circles. Do these in various sizes to break it up. You don't have to do it like a pattern or symmetrical. A couple of little small ones here and there with some bigger round ones. Just painting in your own little details like this can add quite a lot to a model. That is quite a flat, boring surface, so unless you do a really nice gradient over it with some, some strong highlighting around it, just a simple little some dots does go a long way. And that is pretty much it for the model now. All assembled up. I've matte varnished the whole model and then re-glossed the gem. I actually forgot that I was going to matte varnish the whole model, so I had to gloss the gem twice. I finished off the base of the model with a couple of the little GW green and sort of lighter dead browny coloured tufts and some nice flowers from a little store on eBay. I'll put a link in the notes for those because they're really nice actually, and then a few little leaves scattered around as well, and some sort of static grass in there just to add a bit more colour. I wanted a bit more of a bare looking base to start with, but I decided that the model had quite a lot of colour on it, so it would be nice to actually put quite a colourful base as well, even though normally you'd have a really colourful model and a not so colourful base to get a nice contrast. I felt that doing it this way it sort of kept the woodland feel to the model. I really hope you've all enjoyed this video on how to paint a Sylvaneth Treelord Ancient. If you do have any comments, please leave them in the video, and I'll see what I can do about adding more or less in the next ones. And You know, if there's anything you really dislike or really would like to see, let me know. I'm quite open to doing these videos how you'd like to see them, and yeah, be sure to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.